So the topic that I'd like to talk about is the monetary order for the euro. I think it is useful to remind ourselves, at least that's my reading of history, that the euro owes its existence to a French-German accord after, or at the time of unification. In order to establish its European credentials, Germany, and at the time represented by Chancellor Kohl, was willing to give up the Deutschmark and to enter into a currency union at the behest of France. I think that was an important driver. So the two countries are key here to understand what happened afterwards. And I think to understand what is going to happen in the future, it's also very important to understand the differences of views, the differences of philosophy on the role of policy in these two countries. So what are these differences? I think there is a tradition of thinking in France that is very predominant, which I call here loosely with Hayek rational constructivism. You all will recognize the first line. The Cartesian philosophy is, I think, the background to the predominant thinking in France about the role of the state. The state in Cartesian thinking is an organization pursuing certain goals. Hayek would call it thesis. In this thinking, money is, of course, a state-licensed instrument for the pursuit of policy goals. And state money is issued in a monopoly as legal tender. I contrast this with the British liberal, classical liberal idea, perhaps I dub it critical rationalism. This has also a German tradition. There's of course Kant, there's Wilhelm von Humboldt, and that was revived, this liberal tradition of Germany was revived, of course, after World War II, in the social market economy after Ludwig Erhard, Ordnungspolitik. So that created a certain, or has a certain standing in German thinking. Now, that liberal tradition would look at society based on rules, allowing individuals to pursue their own ends. So not society has a goal, but society is there to allow individuals to pursue their goals. Society itself doesn't have a goal. When you think about the consequences of the monetary order from this, then money is a means of exchange that is not a state affair. It's spontaneously found by social agreement, like the gold standard you mentioned. And you would have a different monetary order, not state money issued in a state monopoly, but basically a commodity money or a variant of commodity money. These are fundamental disagreements of views that had to be overcome when constructing the euro by making a lot of poor compromises. And the poor compromises are the compromises that we carry with us, which create presently the problem and which will create future problem if we don't find a solution to them. Very briefly, what are the different characteristics? I will be pretty short. Of course, the commodity money version or order has an inelastic supply of money. Banks and states can go bankrupt. Remember the no bailout clause that was once established as a binding rule. And if states are bankrupt, they need to give up the commodity money standard. Countries dropped out of the gold standard that couldn't cope. Against that, state money as a financial instrument has elastic supply by a state-owned central bank to achieve policy objectives. 2% inflation, for instance. The central bank is the lender of last resort for banks and also, as we find out, will be pushed into the position of a lender of last resort for states. Now, this disagreement was papered over, as I said, in poor compromises when we constructed the euro, and it didn't show up as a problem for 10 years. Why? Because the euro was founded at a time when the global credit bubble expanded and therefore in a regime of soft budget constraints. Government deficits could be funded cheaply, private households, banks, everyone could get credit at a rock bottom rate. There was really no hard budget constraint in this time. That changed when the credit bubble burst. But in order to help the euro to survive, we replaced basically the cheap private credit that was no longer there with official credit. Greece was really the case that showed what was at stake and is, as the British are saying, the canary in the gold mine that dropped off the rail when the poison came in. So we kind of stabilized the system really by replacing private credit by public credit. And as this progressed, as the crisis progressed, we found the need to define the euro's identity clearly. There was a choice. You either keep the Maastricht model with no bailout, so this would have been the commodity money standard, but then you have to let countries get out. And you would establish a hard budget constraint for everyone. Or you keep all members in EMU, and then you have to let the model adjust. You accept the soft budget constraint, and you basically establish the euro as state money. So we were in this forced to choose, a choice that we didn't make before, and we struggled with it. We had 2010-11, you will remember, the idea that we could perhaps come back to the Maastricht rules, but that was difficult. The crisis deepened. And then in 2012, we gave the priority to maintaining EMU membership over maintaining the model. Brexit was off the table. It came back later, but it was not really a serious issue anymore. And that confirmed or established the change of the character of the euro, away from commodity money that was kind of one element, given it at its birth, defined as state money. So in commodity money, we of course have economic and financial sovereignty at the member state level, but the demands on national policy is quite challenging. And as Mr. Oppenheimer said before, you need a lot of flexibility to make it work. We defined it as now as state money. You need a state to issue state money, but there is no political will to create a state, and that has left us in limbo. So what has happened? Basically what has happened is that we created a shadow state for the euro. I will try to illustrate for you the shadow state of the euro by establishing here 4 objectives which we need to pursue to put EMU on a firm footing. Price stability is the goal that is enshrined in the treaties. For that we need fiscal discipline. People found out early on and phrased this in the Stability and Growth Pact. We also need economic flexibility and growth to make it work, and we need financial stability. So under the initial monetary order, we had only one institution, the ECB, looking after price stability in the Maastricht Treaty, and we added on a stability pact in order to ensure fiscal discipline. The rest was left for national states to pursue, but it did not work. So we created, as the crisis went on, we created an adjustment mechanism, ESM, which was supposed to give adjustment funding subject to conditions. That was a crisis management mechanism. Then people found out we need also to have precautionary measures. So we added on pacts. Stability pact didn't work, so we made out of it a 6-pack, 2-pack, Euro Plus pact. Top-down was not so successful in the past, so we added on bottom-up, a fiscal pact. Well, yes, that is something that we can do, but the question is, what happens if the ESM runs out of money? We gave it 500 billion. Then I remember the debate among economists. People said, no, you need $1 trillion. You know, if Italy comes about and needs help, and people, you know, 1 trillion is not enough. You need 2 or 3 or 4. We had a bidding process among financial economists, and someone came up with the idea and said, you need infinite funding. And this brings the ECB into the middle. So now this is my organizational structure of the shadow state for the euro. And as you can see, the ECB is the spider in the web. Now the ECB is responsible for almost everything, right? Not only price stability, it has a role to play in fiscal policy through outright monetary transaction. I would say in parentheses a bit of an Orwellian term, right? Because it is neither outright nor monetary. It's basically fiscal and hidden. You have the ECB involved in maintaining financial stability, single supervisory mechanism. They also give constant advice to enhance economic flexibility. The problem with this is that the shadow state for the euro does not work because people don't accept politically the ECB as the shadow government, as what it has been established. Therefore, this thing cannot survive. Even the very pro-EMU people would argue it cannot survive this way. You need to have something in its place because, as we know historically, monetary union with state money, in the state money regime, not the gold standard that you talked about before, but the state money needs a state. Yeah, I gave you two historical examples, one that has taken a long time to unwind, one which was sort of kind of a one-day fly, the ruble zone. Few people remember it. So what are the possible solutions? Well, we can establish now institutionally EMU with a soft budget constraint. In this, we have now to move forward to replace the monetary funding from the ECB by other funding facilities. And when you look at the reflection paper of the European Commission, I see basically the outlines for this. As the ECB needs to extract itself from QE, as the recovery can now no longer be overlooked, you need something else in place. So therefore you find here a lot of elements that should replace the funding by the ECB with other funds, risk-sharing funds, macroeconomic stabilization funds are in the paper mentioned, or a budget for the euro area. That's one way to go forward. The problem is that you may be able to keep mechanically the euro together, but you are basically introducing ever stronger political centrifugal forces that are driving apart because people say, I don't want to pay for the others. So therefore, if we want to make the euro really last, I'm afraid there is no alternative than to construct EMU with a hard budget constraint. It's the only way that we can agree as a community of nation states to live with one currency. And here are a couple of thoughts. We would have to redefine the euro as a currency in a super gold standard. What does that mean? We have first agreed a true monetary union. We have so far a cash union. But the bank deposits are different from country to country. People have less trust in a deposit in Italy than they have in Germany. That's why we have such huge target imbalances. So I think we have to establish then a true monetary union by making the deposits like cash, i.e. 100% backing of the deposits with reserves that the banks held with the ECB. Then you have a cash and a book money union. We need an adjustment mechanism, but a hard one, enforcing hard budget constraints. I call it a European Monetary Fund. But when I came up with this idea with my friend Daniel Gross in 2010, we thought this should be an adjustment mechanism with a sovereign debt restructuring facility and the ability to have countries exit EMU which can't cope. Therefore, state insolvency procedure, EMU exit clause. I would also think in order to rein in the European Central Bank, there's one thing that you need that can do that, and this is competition. No company provides better products in a more cost-efficient way than one that faces competition. So therefore, I would move away from the single currency idea to a common currency idea. Allow competition to flourish from private and public currency issuers. Now, of course, this is an idea. The political chances of getting this are very, very slim. So I end here with the unfortunate positive quotation mark projection that presumably EMU will fail. I don't know when, but I think it will. Thank you very much.